Edward Manock's death now left Billy Bishop as the undisputed king of the British Empire's skyfighters. June of 1918 had been the Canadians' final month of combat flying, but what a remarkable month it had been. On the 1st, Bishop had driven down a Pfalz single-seater near Armentières, and then returned to the same location the following day to destroy another Pfalz. On June 4th, he added 2 albatrosses to his score, knocking them out of the sky just minutes apart. Between the 15th and the 18th, 8 more German aircraft fell victim to a seemingly unquenchable thirst for victories. Bishop's combat formula had been a combination of cool planning, tested and tried tactics, and occasional spurts of recklessness. Like the great ace Albert Ball, he often flew alone and would stalk his intended targets for miles, carefully maneuvering into position until he had the advantage of height or surprise. Other times he would simply fling himself against his opponents, counting on his superior flying and gunnery skills to ensure a successful conclusion to the contest. In June of 1917, Billy Bishop had executed a daring pre-dawn attack on the German airfield at Estermel. Arriving over the field at 4:30 in the morning, he found 7 Albatross fighters sitting on the ground with their engines already running as the Germans prepared for their early morning patrol. As Bishop's Nieuport sped across the field spewing machine gun fire, German pilots raced to their machines and gunned their motors in an attempt to get themselves airborne. With ground fire converging on his craft from all corners of the field, Bishop bore down on the lead German scout, which had just barely left the ground when the Canadian hit it with a short burst and sent it slamming back to earth. A second Albatross also managed to get its wheels off the ground, but as Bishop raced towards it firing, the German swerved into a tree, losing his wings and sending the wreckage cascading to the ground beyond the perimeter of the airfield. Meanwhile, 2 enemy fighters had managed to get into the sky by taking off in the opposite direction. After the second Albatross had crashed into the tree, Bishop had hauled back on the stick and started climbing. Now there were 2 Albatrosses in the air and another pair down below racing to take off. Well, one of the German machines flew a short distance away from the fight to begin maneuvering for advantage. The second Albatross made straight for Bishop's Nieuport, and after a brief dogfight also fell to the Canadians' guns. Seeing that the time was right to flee, Bishop gunned his motor back towards the lines, and by 5:15 was safely back on the ground with No. 60 Squadron at Files Camp Farm. The Nieuport he'd been flying was shot so full of holes it was a wonder it had remained airborne long enough to bring its pilot home. Later that day, a reconnaissance flight confirmed the Canadian's deeds, and he was soon summoned before the King of England and awarded the Victoria Cross for his actions. A year later, on what would be his last day of combat flying, Bishop would put on another show no less spectacular. On June 19, 1918, Bishop took off alone in the misty drizzle of a gray dawn and started out towards Passchendaele, one of his favorite hunting grounds. Atrocious weather had left the ace with little hope of actually finding Germans on this morning, but over Plogstadt Wood, despite the poor visibility, he suddenly made out the outline of another machine with black crosses on its wings. Bishop had stumbled upon an LVG reconnaissance machine, escorted by 4 Pfalz fighters. In less than 15 minutes, all 5 of the German aircraft were blasted from the sky, and William Avery Bishop flew home and into history as the highest-ranked British surviving ace, with an official score of 72 victories. The High Command deemed that Bishop, with his vast experience, was too valuable to risk in combat, and after being promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel, was earmarked to be the first commanding officer of the newly formed Canadian Air Force. Although his new administrative job wouldn't have been his first choice, Bishop would spend the last months of the war enjoying the upper social circles that his status had suddenly thrust him into.